We're looking at a story in Matthew 15 about the Canaanite woman whose daughter is severely demon possessed. And it seems like Jesus is rejecting her on every front and not answering her. He goes silent, he calls her a dog, and many, many other things. And so in verse 21, it says, he answered her not a word. Now she would have heard how Jesus had healed people, but Jesus acted like he didn't even hear her crying out to him. Do you ever feel that way? It seems so unkind. It's almost like God doesn't even know what's going on in our lives. At times God goes silent, even when we are desperate. At this point, she could have walked away, disappointed, offended. He didn't even say anything, but she didn't. That's an aspect of faith. You don't walk away when there's silence, when there's no answer, when God's not doing anything. She loved her daughter so much, she would put up with almost anything to get what she came for. So she held on in faith. So again, silence of Jesus was just testing her faith. I remember getting this testimony some years ago, and God had spoken to this person to come to New Zealand. I mean, significant encounter with God. So I thought, wow, God's with me. Once I get to New Zealand, it's going to be a walk in the park. And then they said, ever since I came to New Zealand, it's been otherwise. Despite having a qualification, they had to study all over again. They met with one problem after another problem. Friends mocked them about their encounter and coming to New Zealand. And they prayed and prayed, and they said God was silent for 2 years. So badly, this person began to fall away from God. And then eventually God led them to Church Unlimited, where their walk was restored. And then they heard a message on prayer. And the person says, I became very specific in my prayers about my job. And 2 days later, I totally unexpectedly, I got a call and received a good job. But the person said that for 2 years of silence, God was still at work. The person eventually, came back into church, and God worked a miracle. The next thing Jesus says to the Canaanite woman is, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. In other words, I'm not sent to the Gentiles like you. It sounds like I won't heal your daughter, doesn't it? She heard what they were saying. As an outsider, she had no right to a claim on the great power she knew that Jesus had. This would discourage most people, but this woman's great faith begins to emerge because she would not give up. Despite those discouraging words that, hey, the power of God is not for you Gentiles. This is for the Jews. Healing is a children's bread. Great faith defies human thinking. What was her next step? We read there that, verse 25, she came and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me. She understood Israel was God's priority, but she could still worship him. She knew there was a great kindness in Jesus, and she appealed to that aspect of his nature. Do you remember Hannah in the book of Samuel, who was barren? She had a huge heartache. What did she do? She went to the temple every year to worship God. The Canaanite woman, when God was silent, worshipped. When she was discouraged, she worshipped. Even though Jesus was not coming through on her behalf, like Hannah of old, she worshipped. And in the end, both of them got the desire of their hearts. What do you do when it seems like God's not going to answer? What do you do when God goes silent? What do you do when God almost seems to say, this breakthrough, this healing is not for you? When there's no word of guidance, what do you do when nothing's happening? Can I encourage you and me? Let's be like these two great women of God who, when everything was against them, when it looked like God was not hearing, God was not answering, it was like there's no breakthrough coming through and time was passing by, they worshipped God. They continued to worship and honor and exalt God. And worship can help us to handle all the discouragements that come our way and keep us in tune with God. And eventually, like Hannah and the Canaanite woman, they both got the miracle. And I trust that we also get our miracle.